This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of And Baby Makes Three by MsAlexWP, composed by Burning Aurora, Caliana, and Flowerhawk. Inner Office Owl. To Hogwarts faculty and staff. From Headmistress Minerva McGonagall.
Welcome, faculty and staff, to another year at Hogwarts. Please accept our warmest wishes for another successful year of magical education. Before I address academic and procedural housekeeping and reminders for the upcoming semester, I'd like to share a bit of happy news. Two esteemed members of our faculty, Professor Remus Lupin Black and Professor Sirius Lupin Black, are expanding their family. Professor Lupin is pregnant. We're very excited for their new addition. We ask the staff to remember that of age, unmated alphas can occasionally become very stimulated by the scent of a pregnant omega. Several of our 7th-year students are included in this population. Therefore, we ask that you remain vigilant and watch for any signs of agitation from students. Such signs may include, but are not limited to, unwelcome scenting, increased vanity, i.e., frequent mirror checking, elaborate hairstyling, wearing dress robes during informal occasions, unprompted muscle flexing, inappropriate gift-giving, boasting about grandiose accomplishments, wearing clothing several sizes too small, lifting heavy objects that do not require lifting, etc. If you notice any of the above warning signs, please do not intervene directly. Instead, promptly notify me or Madame Pomfrey, and we will step in to provide the appropriate care. Professor Lupin will be wearing omega scent blockers during school hours, but these are not fail-safe, especially during pregnancy. Now on to other matters.
Remus read through the inter-office owl over his coffee and toast early on the morning of September 1st. The owl had arrived at his and Sirius's little cottage in Hogsmeade just a few minutes earlier, and Remus was profoundly grateful that Sirius was still asleep, so he could get a chance to read it first. He bit his thumbnail and read through it again, drumming his fingers on the kitchen table nervously. He was not looking forward to Sirius reading this letter. It's not like they didn't know that it was coming. Ever since Remus's healer had given them the good news about the baby, they'd been working all summer with Madame Pomfrey and Professor McGonagall to ensure that Remus and his students would remain safe and comfortable at school. Seeing all of these warnings in stark black and white, though, was another matter, especially since Remus's pregnancy had already caused his normally calm-ish husband to devolve into an overstimulated bundle of possessive alpha nerves and bravado. Okay, who was Remus kidding? Sirius Black, the devil-may-care motorbike-riding, inked-up, risk-fueled, smart-mouthed, hot-tempered, too-clever, live-wire, cocky-as-fuck Sirius Black, had never exactly been what you'd call calm, but he had mellowed quite a lot since settling down into the life of a married professor. That is, until Remus got pregnant. Sirius somehow knew that Remus was pregnant even before Remus himself did.
"Your cheeks,"
Sirius said one morning while Remus stood at the kitchen counter making tea.
"They're pinker than usual."
Remus reached for a slice of lemon, but drew his hand back quickly as soon as his fingers touched the rind. Something about the texture turned his stomach.
"You can't see my cheeks."
Remus laughed.
"I've got my back to you."
He turned around to see his husband standing still in the middle of the kitchen doorway, staring at his thighs.
"I meant your ass cheeks,"
Sirius clarified. Remus twisted around and looked down at himself. Sure enough, the bottom of his arse cheeks were just visible beneath the hem of Sirius's oversized t-shirt that Remus had been insisting on wearing to bed the past few nights. And they were, indeed, slightly pinker than usual. Remus tugged self-consciously at the hem of the t-shirt and felt the cheeks on his face turn pink too.
"Oh,"
he replied dumbly, watching Sirius walk toward him, sniffing the air like an alert guard dog.
"So what?" "James told me once Lily's ass cheeks got pinker when—"
But Sirius's voice trailed off as he closed the space between them in 3 powerful strides. He palmed Remus's bare arse with his huge hands and pressed his face to Remus's neck. Then he inhaled deeply and then licked the soft skin a couple times for good measure. Remus felt the telltale tingle of arousal as Sirius pulled them closer together.
"You smell different too."
Sirius breathed against his neck, his hand roving across Remus's arse.
"Sweeter, like juicy peaches warming under the summer sun, begging to be bitten and devoured."
"Oh, Sirius, you honey-tongued bastard."
"Are you trying to make me slick in the fucking kitchen at 7 in the morning?"
Remus demanded shakily, forcing himself to pull away. He wanted to drink his tea while it was hot, not entertain whatever weird alpha tendencies Sirius was currently allowing to overtake his brain.
I wouldn't mind if that happened.
Sirius replied, wrapping an arm around Remus's waist underneath his t-shirt and pulling him closer.
But that's not what I'm trying to do. Although, now that you mention it,
And Sirius pressed their hips together, pushing his now hard cock between Remus's thighs. Remus released an undignified moan and felt warm slickness gather between his legs.
Fuck, Sirius.
Remus whimpered as Sirius pushed his fingers into the cleft of Remus's arse, dragged them against the slick hole, then brought his fingers to his own lips, flicking his tongue out to give them a contemplative taste. Remus watched him, half horny and half confused.
You just said you didn't want to make me slick, and now you're...
you're pregnant.
Sirius said. Remus shook his head. No, he couldn't be.
What? No, it's too soon.
But Sirius was insistent.
I'm telling you, Remus, you've got my bun in your oven.
Remus rolled his eyes.
First of all, can you please never say that again? Second, it's impossible. We just started trying like a week ago.
At this, Sirius gave him a smug smirk.
I have super sperm. What can I say?
Remus wrinkled his nose and tried to pull away, but Sirius tugged him back.
I don't want to have this ridiculous conversation.
Remus pouted.
I want my tea.
Do you want it desperately? Do you think you might kill someone if you don't have tea right now?
Sirius asked.
I might kill you if I don't have it right now.
See?
Sirius said triumphantly.
Dangerous cravings are a part of pregnancy. You smell different, you look different, and you taste different. And you've been having a fit if you can't wear my t-shirt to bed every night.
It wasn't a fit.
What else would you call crying hysterically and hexing it out of my hands when I tried to put it into the laundry bin?
Responsible water conservation.
Bullshit, Mooney, you're knocked up.
Sirius said, running a reverent palm across Remus's stomach before leaning down to kiss it.
Eating for two. Up the duff. I can't believe it. My beautiful, gorgeous, perfect Mooney has our baby growing.
Okay, I get it.
Remus said, still not believing him and pushing him away.
Can I please have my tea now?
Sirius reached behind Remus to grab the teacup off the counter.
It's gone a bit cold, love, I'm sorry.
Sirius said. Remus burst into tears. The healer confirmed his pregnancy later that afternoon. 3 months later, Remus had mostly grown used to Sirius's latest obsession with his stomach. He was just starting to show, and Sirius had taken to cupping his hand over Remus's little bump every chance he got.
Perfect fit.
He'd said the day before, as he slid his hand over Remus's stomach from behind. The problem was, Remus was getting his classroom at Hogwarts ready, charming the lock on his grindy-low tank, and listening to a Nirvana record at top volume when Sirius appeared behind him, unannounced.
Merlin, fuck.
Remus had yelled with a jump as Sirius startled him mid-charm, causing the Grindylow to burst out of its tank with a splash and throw an angry fistful of seaweed in retaliation. The seaweed landed across Remus's face with a wet, unpleasant splat.
Sirius Black.
Remus huffed as he vanished the seaweed and shook the lake water out of his hair.
You scared the shit out of me.
Sorry, Mooney.
Sirius said, but didn't look very sorry at all. Instead, he kept one arm wrapped possessively around Remus's waist, pointed his wand at the record player, and lifted the needle off the vinyl.
Do you think listening to music that loud is good for the baby?
Sirius asked, looking around the room at all the cages and tanks that lined the shelves.
And speaking of good for the baby, what about all these dark creatures? My grandmother used to say, if on Wednesday you see a Grindylow, on Thursday you shall be full of woe.
Your grandmother also married her cousin.
Remus reminded him, before kicking Sirius out of his classroom. Now, Remus reread the Inner Office Owl from McGonagall a third time, wondering whether he ought to hide it from Sirius altogether, when...
Morning, baby.
Sirius said, sitting down next to him and looking over his shoulder at the parchment.
What you reading?
Just a note from McGonagall about school starting today.
Remus said, rolling it up and tucking it under his napkin before pushing out of his own chair to settle onto Sirius's lap. He curled himself into Sirius's body, slung his arms around his neck, and nuzzled behind his ear.
How'd you sleep?
Fine.
Sirius replied.
What did the note say?
Nothing much.
Remus said with a cheeky bite to Sirius's mating scar at the curve of his shoulder. He felt Sirius harden beneath him as he kissed up his neck.
I woke up hard as a rock and desperate for your knot. Fancy a shag before we have to go up to the school.
Of course.
Sirius breathed, his hands roving across Remus's stomach, as always.
Let me just read the note.
I'll give you the gist later.
Remus murmured. He moved Sirius's hand downward, wrapping their joined fingers over his own hard cock. Thank Merlin for efficient pregnancy hormones, Remus thought. He tilted his head sideways, and Sirius automatically slid his lips to Remus's neck, as though pulled by some invisible magnet. Remus sighed into him. If he had to distract his husband, this wasn't a bad way to do it. Remus's eyes slid shut, and he gave himself over to Sirius's strong body and intoxicating scent. Ever since he got pregnant, it was as though his body wanted him to submit quickly and easily to his mate. He was just slipping into a fuzzy Omega headspace when
Remain vigilant and watch out for any signs of agitation.
Sirius barked.
I don't need to remain vigilant. I need to fucking kill anyone who looks at you.
Remus snapped out of his fuzzy, happy little sex love trance with a jolt. Sirius looked positively murderous. It was kind of hot. Very hot, actually. But worrying nonetheless.
We've already talked about all of this.
Remus reminded him, but Sirius wasn't listening. Instead, he scooped Remus into his arms, bridal style, and moved with a blind single-mindedness toward their bedroom, muttering about,
My mate.
and,
I'll show them agitation.
while Remus sloppily slicked through his shorts. Remus spent the next several hours being fucked, scented, bitten, and nodded into wonderful oblivion by his very anxious and protective alpha. Sirius had never acted quite this wildly possessive before, and Remus relished every arse-pounding second of it.
By the time we get up to that fucking rat's den of a school, you're going to be drenched in my scent. You'll have my marks all over you, and every step you take will remind you and everyone that looks at you that you, fucking, belong to me.
Still, Remus couldn't help but think that this was going to be a very, very long 6 months. However, Remus was pleasantly surprised when the first semester passed without incident, probably due to the fact that being at Hogwarts seemed to trigger in Remus a terrible kind of morning sickness that lasted most of the day. Madame Pomfrey guessed that it was because Remus was being exposed to so many confusing and conflicting scents all day at school. He'd taken to vomiting before each class behind a curtain in his classroom that he'd surrounded with a disillusionment charm. Soon he had his routine down to a manageable science. He'd puke in a bucket, vanish the sick, charm his mouth clean, and carry on with his lesson. Sirius begged him to take a leave of absence for the rest of the school year, but Remus refused.
What am I supposed to do all day?
Remus asked.
The Witch Weekly crossword and learn to knit. I'd rather pitch myself off the astronomy tower. I feel better once I puke. And Madame Pomfrey says I'm fine as long as I stay hydrated.
At least Sirius could be satisfied by the fact that Remus's constant sickness seemed to have made him unappealing to the school's population of unmated of-age alphas. All that changed, though, during Christmas break. Remus's sickness had miraculously ended, and he was looking and feeling absolutely wonderful as he entered his 3rd trimester. His skin was glowing, his hair was shining, and his arse, according to Sirius, had never looked better or more edible. In fact, it was Sirius's new favorite place to bite on his way to eating out Remus's hole, which was wetter and more pliant than ever lately.
You taste like a fucking caramel apple.
Sirius would drunkenly mutter from between his legs before hungrily diving in for more. And they were both absolutely insatiable. Each night, Sirius would feast on Remus's arse before fucking him hard and nodding him to sleep, spooning him tightly while buried inside him, with one strong arm around his waist and a protective hand curving over his swollen belly. Remus had never felt safer or more perfectly engulfed in all his life.
I love you.
Sirius would whisper sweetly, stroking his hair as Remus drifted off to sleep. He woke up clean and dry every morning and knew that Sirius must be quietly cleaning them up every night while Remus slept. But Sirius wasn't the only alpha who'd noticed that Remus was looking and smelling particularly fetching lately, as they discovered on Christmas Day. Sirius and Remus had spent Christmas exchanging gifts and enjoying each other's ahem company twice, before floating happily into the Great Hall for Christmas supper. Remus in particular felt pleasantly hazy and fucked out. He must have looked that way too, because Sirius couldn't help stealing glances and letting his hand wander during the meal. Once he even pressed a sneaky kiss behind Remus's ear, making Remus melt like warm hot fudge over a sundae. If Sirius had had eyes for anyone but Remus just then, he might have noticed that Damien Gulls, a tall and burly 7th year, was watching Remus too. He might have also noticed that Damien had foregone his usual school robes in favor of his Ravenclaw Quidditch uniform, which stretched tightly across his broad beater's shoulders. He might have seen that Damien had styled his hair to look rakishly bedroom tousled. As it was, Sirius did not notice these things, and neither did Remus, despite Damien's increasingly desperate bids for his attention. First, he opened a bottle of oak-matured mead with his teeth. Then, he regaled the table with a story about the time he single-handedly fought off 6 enchanted bludgers at once. Finally, after nothing else had worked, he stood up and lifted a chair straight over his head.
"I'm strong,"
he announced, looking at Remus and winking. Sirius grabbed Remus and wrapped both arms around his shoulders with an outraged gasp. Remus could feel Sirius's body thrumming with barely controlled alpha energy.
Mr. Girls, get a hold of yourself.
Professor McGonagall shrieked.
And put the furniture down at once.
Madame Pomfrey rushed over to Damien, whispered something soothing into his ear, and eased his arms back down. He released the chair without looking away from Remus, but allowed Madame Pomfrey to take him gently by the wrist and led him out of the great hall. Remus chanced a glance at Sirius, who watched Damien's every step out of the room with a dangerous single-mindedness that would have sent someone older and wiser than Damien sprinting for the relative safety of the Forbidden Forest. After that, Damien gave Professor Black a wide berth when they passed in the corridors and elected to take the rest of his defense against the dark arts Newt's course with a private tutor. But Sirius, it seemed, wasn't taking any additional chances. Remus stopped short when he walked into his classroom after Christmas break to see a familiar black-haired head at the back of the room.
What are you doing here?
Remus hissed at Sirius as his 7th-year students filed in around them. Sirius folded his arms across his chest and looked up at Remus with an innocent expression that didn't quite hide the storminess in his eyes as 2 tall alphas walked in and said hello to Remus. Sirius traced their movements until they sat down near the front of the classroom, right next to Remus's desk.
Now why the fuck would they sit there?
Sirius muttered, drawing his wand from his pocket and standing up, but Remus grabbed him by the shoulders and shoved him back down.
Answer me, Black. Why are you in my classroom?
Sirius raised an eyebrow and tipped back in his seat with a smirk, and Remus's memory suddenly flew back to their own time as Hogwarts students and Sirius's familiar cocky back-of-the-class posture. He always had a cigarette behind his ear and the correct answer to every single one of the professor's questions ready on his lips. He'd deliver each answer with a smug wink across the classroom at Remus. Remus would watch him with his intoxicatingly arrogant alpha swagger and feel his scrappy little omega self falling hard and fast for his best friend. He couldn't resist Sirius then, and he couldn't resist him now.
Take a guess, love.
Sirius answered.
You need to brush up on the difference between red caps and cappers.
I rearranged my schedule so I could sit in on your 6th and 7th year classes. I realized at Christmas that you shouldn't be alone anymore.
Sirius, this is crazy. These kids are perfectly innocent, and I doubled up on my scent blockers. Christmas was a fluke. You know that. We never should have come downstairs in the state we were in. And frankly, I'm a little insulted that you don't think I can defend myself. I'm the defense professor, in case you've forgotten.
Of course I haven't forgotten.
Sirius said with a quelling tone and a soothing hand to Remus's back.
You're a faster duelist and more proficient hexer than anyone I know, and woe betide anyone who underestimates you.
Thank you.
Remus said, feeling his body soften under Sirius's gentle touches.
Now please go back to your own class.
I told you, Moony. I rearranged my schedule.
Sirius said.
I don't have a class to go back to. And besides, Pomfrey and McGonagall agree with me that I should be here.
What? No. You just said you knew I could defend myself. These are unqualified kids who...
They might be magically unqualified kids, Remus, but they're still unmated alphas.
Sirius said in a low voice as he looked around the room.
And that's not the only reason I'm here anyhow. Now that you're further along, I should be with you for all kinds of reasons. You had that dizzy spell just last week, and your mother told me that preterm labor runs in your family.
Remus opened his mouth to protest, but the bell rang before he could speak.
This isn't over.
Remus hissed and made his way to the front of the classroom to begin his lesson.
Everyone, you'll notice that Professor Black has joined us today.
He said with an incline toward the back of the room as every head swiveled around. Sirius waved once, and Remus continued.
He'll be observing today's lesson so he can better incorporate defense against the dark arts into his interdisciplinary transfiguration curriculum. He'll not be disturbing us, and I ask that you pretend that he's not here. Now everyone, wands out, please, and find a partner.
The lesson passed quickly and easily while the students practiced advanced defensive blocking. Remus tried his best to ignore Sirius, but felt his eyes tracking his every movement, especially when Remus shed his school robes to better demonstrate the wand movements for Subsisto Ignis.
Will you show us again, Professor?
Jack Perkins asked, and Remus saw Sirius anxiously shift in his chair.
Yes.
Remus said.
Watch my hands carefully.
Remus got into a defensive stance and raised his arms. He was about to say the incantation, but Sirius's voice broke through the quiet.
He said, watch his hands, Perkins.
Sirius snarled.
Not his.
Thank you, Professor Black.
Remus snapped, changing his wand movements mid-spell, and instead casting a sneaky tongue-tying jinx on his husband without anyone else in the class even noticing. Then Remus smoothly demonstrated Subsisto Ignis once more before glancing at the clock.
Okay, kids, we're out of time.
Remus announced to a collective groan from his students. It had been an exceptionally good lesson, despite Sirius's dark looks and editorializing.
For homework, please practice Subsisto Ignis over the weekend and be ready to deflect Flagrante on Monday. I will not be afraid to singe your robes in the name of you passing your new practical exams.
Then Remus turned to Sirius and lifted the tongue-tying jinx with a wave of his wand.
Professor Black, a word.
The classroom had barely emptied when Sirius stood up and rushed over to Remus.
He was staring at your ass like he wanted to knock you into next Friday, Mooney.
Sirius said, but Remus shook his head.
He was doing no such thing.
Mooney said crisply.
Consider yourself banned from this classroom.
But
banned.
Yet Remus should have known better than to ban Sirius Black from anything. The second Sirius was told not to do something was the second he wanted to desperately do exactly that thing and figure out any way possible in order to do it. Things were quiet for several weeks before Sirius tried again. Remus's belly grew even more, and the baby started delivering frequent kicks to Remus's diaphragm, unexpectedly knocking the wind out of him mid-sentence. Sirius was the picture of the doting alpha husband, cradling Remus's belly in his hands and kissing it every chance he got. He rubbed Remus's tired and swollen feet at the end of a long school day, drew Remus warm, lavender-scented baths for him to relax in, and kept the house elves busy with Remus's midnight requests for chocolate-covered pickles or whatever other wild cravings struck his fancy. Sirius was so sweet and calmly attentive, in fact, that Remus nearly forgot about the classroom incident of a few weeks earlier. That is, until Remus walked into his empty classroom near the end of January and encountered a familiar scent. It was wonderful. A mix of worn leather, the forbidden forest, the electric smell of the air just before a lightning strike, warm vetiver, tobacco, and oddly a touch of dog, that sweet soft spot, just behind its ear. It was a scent that filled Remus with comfort, safety, happiness, and arousal, and of course he would know it absolutely anywhere. He looked around for the source of the smell, but he was apparently alone. No matter, he pointed his wand at the classroom door, locked it, and charmed himself completely naked.
Ready for my 7th years?
Remus said breezily and bent over to touch his toes.
Oi,
Sirius cried, bursting out from underneath the invisibility cloak.
do you always get bloody starkers alone in your classroom?
Remus nearly fell over laughing at the surprised look on Sirius's face.
You think you're funny, do you?
Sirius said, while Remus waved his wand to put his clothes back on.
Yeah, actually I do.
Remus laughed.
How did you know I was here anyhow?
Pads, I'm a pregnant Omega werewolf. I have the nose of a fucking bloodhound right now. Better question, how did you get Harry's cloak?
Met him for a drink in the village after you went to sleep last night.
Sirius said guiltily.
You saw our godson without me.
Remus cried.
I miss him.
In my defense, you were asleep at 7 p.m.
Sirius said. Well, that was true, Remus had to admit. He could barely keep his eyes open past dinner these days.
Besides,
Sirius added.
it was for the greater good.
Spying on me, you mean?
Not spying, Mooney, keeping you safe.
Sirius insisted.
You were having those false contractions a few days ago, and I didn't want you to be alone.
I'm never alone in this bloody castle. I'm always surrounded by students.
Horny morons.
Sirius muttered.
And they could summon you in half a second.
But I love you and… Out, Padfoot.
Remus said, giving Sirius a quelling kiss and sending him on his way before calling after him down the hall.
I love you too.
Sirius just flipped him off over his head as he walked away. A week later, Sirius tried a little harder. It was morning when Remus noticed a student he didn't recognize sitting at the back of one of his 7th-year classes. She was tiny and very pretty, with long dark hair, dark brown eyes, and delicate-looking features. She wore Ravenclaw robes and greeted Remus with a note from McGonagall about being a transfer student who'd been homeschooled until recently. Her name was Rebecca.
Welcome, Rebecca.
Remus said.
If you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.
Thank you, sir.
She said in a quiet voice, tucking her hair behind her ear demurely.
Have a seat and we'll just…
Remus's eyes fell to Rebecca's neck, where the collar of her robe had fallen away to reveal the edge of a familiar-looking crescent moon tattoo over her clavicle. Remus suppressed an eye roll as he handed the girl a textbook and watched her walk back to her seat. He was half tempted to make the class do Bogarts to force Rebecca to reveal her poorly concealed secret, but he realized what shape her Bogart would take and didn't fancy seeing himself dying in childbirth, probably naked and bloodied, in front of the entire class. Instead, he decided to punish Rebecca in a more subtle way, by pairing her with the clumsiest, most dim-witted student in the class for dueling practice. Remus's stomach was cramping with laughter, and his eyes burned with held-back tears as he watched an exasperated Rebecca dodge Jinx after blundering Jinx from Richard Smalls.
It's a stinging jinx, Richard. It's not that hard.
Rebecca finally snapped, dousing a small fire that had erupted at the bottom of her robe with a wordless flick of her hand.
And it doesn't have the 17 extra syllables you're saying every time you cast it. Just listen. Listen to how it's pronounced.
Wordless, wandless magic. Very impressive for a student, Rebecca.
Remus mused as he wandered over to the pair. Richard was scratching his head dopily, while Rebecca glared at Remus. The bell rang, and the students started to file out, but Remus grabbed Rebecca by the arm and pulled her back.
Fancy a shag?
He asked.
Professor.
She cried, outraged, and Remus doubled over laughing. Rebecca huffed and waved a wand over herself.
How did you know?
Sirius demanded.
You forgot to get rid of one of your tattoos, among other things.
Fuck.
Human transfiguration, Padfoot. Really? And on yourself? That's fucking dangerous.
Remus scolded, but Sirius waved him off.
I didn't hear you complaining that time I transfigured my tongue into…
Fine, I get your point.
Remus interrupted. He didn't need to slick himself in the middle of his classroom at the memory of that. Besides, he knew that Sirius could accomplish rare, dangerous magic in his sleep.
But tricking me is never going to work.
Then please, just let me stay.
Sirius asked quietly, wrapping his hands around Remus's waist and pulling him close.
I won't do anything. I won't say a word. I just want to be near you and look out for you.
He dropped to his knees and splayed his fingers across Remus's belly, kissing across it before whispering,
I love you so much.
At his words, they both felt the biggest, strongest kick yet. It took Remus's breath away and knocked Sirius back on his heels. He looked up at Remus with wide-eyed adoration and astonishment. Remus laid his hands over Sirius's and nodded through his sudden tears.
You can stay, baby,
Remus whispered. Remus didn't want to admit it at first, but he was happy to have Sirius in the classroom with him as he approached his due date. He was as big as a house, incredibly uncomfortable, exhausted, and his magic was getting a bit wonky. Sirius seemed to have a sixth sense about when Remus needed a little extra help, like the time Remus wanted to hand out jinxed objects to the class and couldn't seem to cast the charm to lift the box off the shelf without also conjuring a hummingbird. Sirius would silently and smoothly step in, waving his wand to do whatever task was vexing Remus at the moment, and Remus was profoundly grateful for his calming, steady presence.
Who would have thought that I'd be the composed, level-headed one in this relationship?
Sirius asked one day at the end of March. Remus had just finished his last lesson of the day and was sinking into Sirius's chest, practically ready to fall asleep, when he felt a sharp cramp and gasped, gripping his stomach.
What is it, Mooney?
Sirius asked, just as a gush of liquid soaked Remus's trousers. Remus clutched Sirius's arm, thanking Merlin that Sirius had insisted on staying with him these last few weeks.
I think my water just broke.
Remus breathed, looking up into Sirius's worried face.
Oh, fuck.
Sirius said, all level-headedness flying out the window.
Lay down. I'll deliver the baby myself.
Sirius, we're going to St. Mungo's.
Interoffice owl. To Hogwarts faculty and staff. From Headmistress Minerva McGonagall.
It is my pleasure to announce the birth of the newest member of our Hogwarts family. Edward James Lupin Black was born on March 30th at 7:07 p.m., weighing 8 pounds 11 ounces. His fathers, Remus and Sirius, are doing well. They are calling the baby Teddy. Professors Lupin and Black will both be taking a leave of absence for the remainder of the school year. They welcome visitors to their home in Hogsmeade as long as, in the words of Professor Black, it's not that moronic Alpha Damien Gulls. I swear to Merlin Minerva he'll have 6 extra arms and a brand new speech impediment if he comes anywhere near my husband and baby. We wish the Lupin Black family all the best.
Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora, Caliana, and Flowerhawk.